Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to our excellent panel discussion. Brilliant panel involved in WaterWatch from different perspectives. Today we're going to talk about the past, present, and future of WaterWatch in Victoria. It's all part of National Volunteer Week and a 30-year celebration of Waterway citizen science. Of course, before we start, we acknowledge and recognise the primacy of traditional owners' obligations, rights and responsibilities to use and care for their traditional lands, water and sea. We acknowledge the historic dispossession and dislocation of First Peoples in this country, and we celebrate the resilience of the oldest living culture on the planet. We look forward to a very different future and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. I'm Anthony Boxshall from Science Into Action, which is a science impact company, and I will be the moderator for this wonderful, fine conversation with a brilliant panel of WaterWatch experts. I cannot wait. So, a couple of logistics first. A few people are still joining. Somewhere on your screen, bottom top side somewhere, there's a Q&A function, and we will use the Q&A today a little bit, and we'll gather any questions you have in that Q&A, and we'll have a short Q&A, question and answer session at the end of the hour. You can vote up questions if you like by liking them to the top of the list. So before we get chatting about the past 30 years of WaterWatch and the next 30 years of WaterWatch, let me introduce our panel for today. Kristen Lees is a Citizen Science Coordinator from Corangamite CMA. Good afternoon. Yeah, it is afternoon, isn't it? Kristen began working at Corangamite CMA as a Citizen Science Project Officer in January 2012. However, her introduction to WaterWatch was during her time as a land care facilitator in Apollo Bay, testing water quality above and below land care projects. She's got a Bachelor of Arts Honours, Social Science and Environment from RMIT, and is a current WaterWatch coordinator. And a particular thank you, Kristen, for coming in at the last minute due to an illness from one of our other panel members. Deirdre unfortunately could not make it today, and I think you got the phone call about an hour and a half ago. So thank you for joining us this morning. Our second panelist is Jeanie Clark, volunteer from Japarra WaterWatch Group, and Jeanie brings, well, it must be many decades, about 28 years worth of WaterWatch knowledge, experience to our brilliant expert panel. And her professional work with the program includes being a coordinator in the Wimmera, a science teacher and a river detectives coordinator. She's also been volunteering for 28 years and helped set up the Japarra WaterWatch Group in 1995. James Frazer, next on the list, is the environmental water delivery lead for Melbourne Water. Can see the little logo there. Can see your top two, Jeanie. Fantastic. And our WaterWatch top there. Anyway, James was WaterWatch coordinator at Melbourne Water between 2016 and 23 and was responsible for the coordination of Melbourne Water's frog census program. He's now environment water lead in the water resources and Upper Yarra team at Melbourne Water, coordinating the delivery of environmental water in Melbourne's rivers and wetlands. And last but certainly by not least is Dr. Pat Bonney from RMIT. He's a social scientist with a keen interest in the potential for citizen science to create meaningful connections between communities and government for sustainable waterway management. Pat's well placed to provide a kind of a strategic perspective on the program while factoring in the value and potential of citizen scientists and what they are in improving programs like this in the long run. So, as you can see, a really broad panel with a lot of wonderful experience, different perspectives, and they're going to share those about the role and impact of a program like WaterWatch. I'll have a birthday cake, I think, at the end. I think Jake is sending that around to everybody by email as we speak. But let's get into the first question. Okay. We've got a couple of questions to have a conversation about. I want to start looking at, 30 years. Let's have a think about the benefits, the values, the impact of WaterWatch from each of your different perspectives. And so what I want to know is, what are the benefits, the values, the impact that WaterWatch has had from your perspective? And I might start with you for this one, James, and then we'll come to you, Jeanie.
Sure, yeah, thanks for the invite, and hello from the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri. I think that the benefits are huge. I'll talk from the perspective of frog census at Melbourne Water, our community frog monitoring program. Massive program, a few thousand volunteers involved in it, and really the benefits. There's benefits to the volunteers, the individuals, in terms of there's nature connection. There's I guess a growth of knowledge that builds an informed and powerful advocate for the waterways. But there's also a lot of benefits to us at Melbourne Water as an organisation. We're working with really informed stakeholders who can help us shape our waterway strategies. And when we develop our waterway strategies, we do that in collaboration with community and other stakeholders. So having a really informed community is fantastic for doing that. And look, the other real benefits is that the citizen science is kind of throwing the net wide in terms of monitoring species, and it can become like a problem identification, or it can pick up early, worrying trends in terms of the trajectory of how species might be faring. And we've had quite a few cases of that at Melbourne Water, with particular endangered species being detected in decline, and the citizen scientists triggering our investigation work there, and us building on their work to invest in recovering them. So that, I guess in a nutshell, is just some of the benefits for us.
Have you seen, I'm interested just to draw it out a little bit further, have you seen kind of perhaps over time, and aside from those early, the kind of almost sentinel kind of, there's something wrong, let's look here. Have you seen impact into, say, strategy or program delivery on the basis of, looking back and seeing the data?
Yeah, absolutely. Like frog census has been running since 2001, so there's now a long-term data set. You can find it on Atlas of Living Australia, where there's been hundreds to thousands of downloads by various users. So there is a baseline of data collected just by citizen scientists out there. In the case of frogs. So there's something to draw on when developing any plans, whether they're at a local site-specific plan and right up to a healthy waterway strategy that governs, how we manage our rivers, creeks, wetlands for the environment. So we will use frogs as an actual condition indicator lined up with a range of other indicators. And that's really sitting on this massive citizen science effort as the baseline of data there. So 100% it's used, and in my current role, environmental water delivery, absolutely used to understand the baseline and then pull in supplementary data as watering actions occur as well.
Thanks, James. We've just seemed to have had a technical challenge with Jeanie dropping out, and Jeanie's back. Wonderful. I won't jump immediately to you, Jeanie, because it'll give you a chance to settle it. You are back. It's great.
Okay,
it's perfect timing too, because I was just going to. I won't jump to you. I was going to, but I think give you time to settle in.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so what about to you then, Jeanie? One of the things that James raised, of course, was the individual benefit to the volunteer, but also the kind of benefit of the science that is then used in the organisation. As someone who's been involved for more than 28 years, what do you think some of the benefits and value and impact of WaterWatch has been?
Yeah, thank you, Anthony, and thank you to WaterWatch Victoria for the opportunity to share a Wimmera perspective, because it's different from all the rest. For background, WaterWatch in the Wimmera has been through two distinct phases. The first was 1995 to 2009, when we had a flourishing WaterWatch community education program with volunteer monitoring. The second has been since then, when the funding was lost and the program ceased suddenly, except for some stubborn volunteers at Japarrat. Through both those phases, the biggest benefits that I can see are three. Firstly, the creation of reliable baseline data. Secondly, the community knowledge that was gendered. And the third is the social engagement for people who are concerned about their environment. So firstly, in the first stage of Wimmera Community WaterWatch, we created Wimmera-wide baseline data that started before the real impacts of climate change. It went through the millennium drought, and it involved local people and places all along the river, around the lake that at that time was full when we started, tributaries and distributaries which used to get annual rain, and natural and man-made water places. So it really gives us data there pre-climate change that will be able to be there for the future. In the second phase, WaterWatch decided to keep on monitoring as long as we could. So we have the data for the drought-breaking flow that came in 2010, the 2011 flood, its lake fill, the lakes drying after that, the return of a seasonal pattern of river water, and then after 3 La Nina years, the lake had finally got water again last December. So secondly, in the first phase, this meant that monitors talked to each other about what they were finding, and the general interest and the knowledge of the water environment in the community was raised. The data is there for the future. And the third one is the strength that WaterWatch has brought, especially WaterWatch, is that people who care about the Wimmera River are getting together once a month to do the hard slog of the monitoring. It's been a social refuge for us where we share anecdotes of things that we observe, where the older members have told us the history of things that were in the past. We've noticed the sad things that are happening. We know that we're documenting them, and we know they're there for the future for others to learn from. And when the water flows, we rejoice together, not just for the quantity, as most people do, but for the quality as well.
Thanks so much, Jeanie. I think this point you're making about the social element, it seems to be a really critical thing when you talk to people about their involvement in citizen science and what they gain from it. Of course, there's the important information, education and data, etc. But that social thing, it seems to be so important. Pat, let's come to you. And yeah, just from your perspective, as an academic that's worked on citizen science, what's the value, the impact and benefit of something like WaterWatch?
Yeah, no, thanks, Anth. And yeah, thanks to Jake and Justine for inviting me on the panel. Look, I think everyone recognises that citizen science has the potential to provide a whole host of benefits. As I said, not just for science, but those social benefits as well, environmental outcomes, local communities. And, this is why citizen science has grown so rapidly over the past decade or so, is because of these multiple wins that can be obtained. But I think one of the things about WaterWatch that's often underappreciated, perhaps, and that I think is different to many other citizen science programs, is its ability to create a bridge between the local community and other groups and organisations that are involved in working across Victoria's water management landscape. And James, you highlighted a good example there. So the program, just from a historical perspective, has been, guided by two main goals or functions. The first being about raising awareness of catchment health issues within local communities. The second, of course, is collecting data to inform, management, on-ground management and policy. And these goals have been fairly consistent over the course of its history. But this third function around providing a conduit to local communities is where I think WaterWatch can really provide significant value to waterway managers and waterway policy. And we've seen this in recent partnerships with academic researchers and universities, with waterway managers, as well as traditional owner organisations. These projects and partnerships offer new ways of working to address the challenges of the day. And that go beyond sort of a traditional focus of WaterWatch on the long-term water quality monitoring or WaterWatch as a community education program. So, one example is a project that I like to, refer to in the Melbourne region, which was about protecting the Yarra pygmy perch. Climate change threatens this species and reduces the available habitat. And so ongoing monitoring is required. WaterWatch partnered with a range of organisations, including, Melbourne Water's research and water resources team, with Parks Victoria, with local councils, with multiple community groups, and, to not only generate the monitoring data, but also provide that community engagement advice and that training. And, not only did the program help to trigger that emergency watering and protect that species, but I think one of the key lessons, at least from my perspective, is that citizens, that project helped to build trust between the different partners involved in that project, and to highlight that citizen science is a really effective way to manage these types of challenges. And then look, there's many other examples to give, and I think we will be watching a short video at some point. Yep. Oh, yeah. So looking forward to that.
I think this point about building trust is really interesting. You know, you can and as James highlighted, you know, and then as Jeanie highlighted, you get the social element, and then as James highlighted, you can actually change strategies and practices and programs within government. The intangible element of trust, though, it's so critical, as you say, Pat. It's so critical in building. And I do like the metaphor, WaterWatch as a bridge, bit kind of river-like there. Good on you. But I think that's really critical in building those trust between institutions and communities. So, Kristen, you're sitting in there, as a coordinator. Come to you as the final one on this topic about, from your perspective, benefits, value, impact of WaterWatch.
Thank you, Anthony. So yes, I'm coming from Gulidjan country here in Colac, and acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. Look, a lot of what the previous speakers have said around the benefits being twofold. There's the hard data coming in to be used for adaptive waterway management, and then there's the community engagement and the sense of stewardship that comes through the program. But I think that one of the benefits is that the program is as diverse as the landscapes we work in. So even how the program is rolled out from a coordinator perspective, some of us are sitting in catchment management, some in land care groups, some in other community groups or water authorities. And we really are reaching out, while wanting to be collecting data for a purpose, we still are always wanting to listen to what the community is wanting that data for. And I think one of our greatest benefits, values, strengths is actually the longevity of the program. We have these massive data sets that are now, after 30 years, very usable. We're able to track those changes. So that's a huge value. That's a huge economic value for waterway managers to be able to access that data. But yet nothing is as great as the social value, which has been brought up by every speaker here, connecting people to their waterways and connecting agency to people. And that, I think, outweighs, as much as it's so important that we have these data sets and that everyone can trust WaterWatch data, and a lot of work has been put into the program to make sure that that data is usable, water quality data, but that connection to community just can't be replicated with a water quality gauge.
Very true indeed. Thanks so much, Kristen. And as Pat mentioned, and it's a nice segue because you're actually the star of the next video or the video we're going to show, well, one of the stars, I should say. And it is actually, as Pat foreshadows, it's actually an example of benefits and value, and that's partnerships, particularly with traditional owners. And so the video is actually about the partnership between Corangamite CMA, Wadawurrung, and WaterWatch Victoria, about work to help rejuvenate the Moorabool, so Moorabool Yallock. And so, Jake, I'm going to get you to press play. He's going to share it. Press play, and then we'll mute ourselves and have a watch. It'll take about 3 minutes, but it's a great story of the program. And it's just perfect timing.
It's a really strong partnership in that we've got a forward conversation at all times, and it's an understanding between both parties and a really sort of fruitful knowledge sharing process.
I think, like any partnership, it's you need to recognise that these relationships take time, and you need to build trust as well. So whereas now we're at the point where Wadawurrung have their own water quality monitoring program, it really did start right at this spot here quite a few years ago, when we just started with a community fishing day, just to get to know each other and start to exchange those aspirations for the Moorabool.
and then realising, well, the aspirations are very, very similar. How can we start to work together?
This project's it's quite special, really. So what it's really doing is enabling us to embed our cultural values in a Western application of WaterWatch and water monitoring. It sort of helps us as traditional owners gain an aspect that, I mean, we know culturally what we need to see happen, but getting that Western application, that Western science into the picture helps us, embed those values and actually work towards what those aspirations actually are in managing our cultural values for waterways.
We started the project looking at how the CMA could add value to work that the Waterway do, and also how the Waterway can add value to work that we do.
We are able to put our cultural values into seasonal watering plans and meld that into what is a scientific process to have ultimately a shared benefit for environmental and cultural aspects.
Quite a lot of the releases are sent down the river to protect cultural values, whether that be significant species or to maintain deep pools, which we have been told by the Waterway have great cultural significance as well. So we realised that it was pretty much a great match to match when those releases were going through, that it actually be the Waterway who are doing that science.
With that Western application of the science and data collection, we can sort of realise what the cultural values are, measured, and work towards really regaining agency over what's happening in those waterways.
We've just put together the very first Waterway water quality report. So this is a data summary of all the work that the Waterway have done, testing water, and also looking at cultural values of water and environmental pressures, and putting everything into one report, to honour the work that's been done by the Waterway, but also a way of showing their community what work's being done too.
With the way government legislation's going and the knowledge we get from the WaterWatch monitoring program, it's really driving our knowledge and our ability to regain agency over our waterways and hopefully ultimately manage them.
Great example there, fantastic example of the partnerships that are possible. It's interesting to just, one of the reflections I have watching that, now it's the second or third time I've seen that, is the changes were not so much to the practical stuff. The program runs the way the program runs. It's just about a mindset change. Oh, we can align a release now and actually has multiple beneficiaries, and we can work through a different way. So, yeah, I love the way that highlights the thing that all of you said in the first round, which is trust, building relationships. Thanks so much for that. And I should take this opportunity to thank Jake Van Dam, who is in the background, making all of this work seamlessly, and also Justine Holmes, statewide coordinator, who's also in the background helping this all run smoothly. Now, look, one of the things we do at a birthday party always is reflect. We think about things we could have done differently, things we could improve. And so what I'm going to ask the panel now is we're going to whip round. We'll start with you, Jeanie, and we're just going to kind of, what could be done differently? What could be done to improve? What would we like to see progress? Oh, going to need you to unmute.
Good idea. Okay. Thank you, Anthony. I hope you won't mind, but I'm going to reflect on what happened when Women Community WaterWatch lost its funding and ceased, because I think it shows the strength of what WaterWatch did and can do, and others can learn from that. So Women Community WaterWatch used to involve community events, school incursions, and monitoring across the Wimmera. We had many very dedicated monitors, most of which operated alone at home on their water patch. They were all lost except one group. We left monitors with their lone equipment though, and the supplies to calibrate it, but there was no backup for them. No one to give help in case of an equipment problem. No one to ask questions of when there was something new that happened in the environment. No one to send data sheets to for data entry, and especially no one to verify the data on the database if it had been added. Incursions in schools that had been raising the knowledge of teachers and students ceased. That impetus to monitor was lost. As I still work in schools, I know that environmental awareness for kids and staff has been lowering since. Community events that made WaterWatch known went too, and with that, the kudos of those who were monitoring for it. It all seemed to reinforce an attitude that the citizen science water watchers didn't deserve support, i.e. the water quality didn't matter anymore. It wasn't felt as a question of dollars. So the message for improving WaterWatch from this is make sure government funders keep the public programs going for citizen science. The second part of my reflection I'd like to be on what keeps a WaterWatch group going, because Jeparat WaterWatch has stubbornly kept on going. And you may pick ideas out of this for helping any of your groups that are struggling or just starting. So Jeparat WaterWatch began as a group of very determined environmentalists, retired farmers. They very well knew the value of what they wanted to do and that they were doing it for the future, not just now. When WaterWatch ceased, the motivation continued because of what they'd experienced in the millennium drought, and the 2011 flood soon happened. What's going to happen next? Well, these monitors had the time to volunteer. They had known each other for years, and they could yarn together about the river and lake and share their knowledge. Their monitoring took place in the comfort of the Jeparat Museum, so they were out of inclement weather if that net was needed. The monitors now still monitor up to a dozen sites a month, depending on how many people we have. The WaterWatch program provided us with equipment, good equipment in the 2000s that is still going. The QA/QC procedures that were established right at the start of WaterWatch in 1995 are still going. The data is reliable, and we know that what we are doing is worthwhile, even if no one seems to be using it. Because they have me as a member, the data on the database is easily entered and verified, so we cover off on that. We aim to report in the local paper what the river and lake is doing at least once a year. And every now and again, we do something special. And the remaining members of Jeparat WaterWatch are, I believe, on today watching this, and I thank them for that interest. That's it.
Thank you, Jeanie. That is it's so seemingly simple that there is this underlying desire and skill set and time and need in community groups, and all it takes is a little bit of resourcing to connect it in to, other uses, the other side of that bridge that Pat was talking about. So I think that is so simple. I mean, in a way, the reflection that I took from those just takes a bit of resources, and the stuff is there. It's untapped, and it can be built because that group has continued after the resourcing stopped, connecting it into the system, so to speak. I want to come to you, Pat, actually. But before I do, I'll just say and let people know that Jake, I should have said this before, Jake has popped the link to that video. If you want to see that video, it's on YouTube. He's popped it into the chat for those who wish to grab that. But how about you, Pat? When you think about, what could WaterWatch do differently? Let's reflect, and how could it improve?
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about this for quite some time, I guess, beginning with my PhD on WaterWatch, on the WaterWatch programs and freshwater citizen science across Australia back in 2016 or so. And yeah, I mean, it was pretty clear when I was beginning this research that one of the most persistent challenges that the program has faced is its ability to link in with management priorities and decision making. And I remember coming across an article when I was doing my reading back in the late 90s, which highlighted that, quote, there was great skepticism and overt opposition by some researchers and government officials about the quality of WaterWatch data. And it's hard to say whether those perceptions have changed. I mean, I'm not working in a government agency, so I guess Kristen and James can reflect on that a little bit more. But, these perceptions do tend to still exist, not just about the WaterWatch program, but citizen science as a practice, whether it's, citizen science data is not credible, or it's not relevant, or it's better placed as a community education program. These sort of things that you hear quite a bit. But the thing is, as Jeanie was mentioning, when volunteers are supported, they can generate that scientific data that is credible, that is relevant, that is comparable to professional approaches, and the academic literature has been consistent in that fact. So I guess when it comes to the challenge of linking data with decision making, which was the focus of my research, at least part of my research, I think we do need to think more broadly about the factors that do create those successful linkages. And one of the case studies I used in my research was the ACT WaterWatch program, which has undergone a significant change over the past 5 or 6 years, and they've been quite successful in integrating the program at a regional level into government decision making and monitoring frameworks. And so I wanted to understand, what's driving that? How did they do this? And it turns out that they work to ensure the consistency of monitoring across the territory, as well as align the program with regional priorities, while still actively supporting volunteer interests and their motivations for participation. They produced an annual report card. They focused on data interpretation, but most of all, and I think this is what really helped to drive the success of the program, is they worked hard to build that support with decision makers, with policymakers who ultimately saw the value in the program as benefiting their work. And so, when it comes to this persistent challenge of data quality, it's not just a data quality issue. It also depends on the capacity and most importantly the willingness of people to work together to convert the potential of citizen science into practice.
Thank you. It's a really good point. I think that how you enable decision makers to be comfortable using data. I come from a position where I don't believe there's, apart from deliberately wrong data, there's no such thing as bad data. There's just badly used data. It's used for the wrong decision. There's some way you can aggregate something and get patterns out of it. Like James was saying before about, sentinels. Look, we better go and look over here. There's always something you can get. It's a really important point that you've made, Pat. So Kristen, to someone who needs to use data to make decisions, I'll come to you and James next, but you first. Anyway, what would you do differently? What do you think about that we can learn and reflect on in the past 30 years?
Look, I think in reflecting on the program in the Corangamite region, and we started in 1994, I have to throw some statistics around because they're pretty impressive, really. So we've had 680 monitors through our program since then. We've collected water quality samples at 800 sites across our catchment. And of course, there will be thousands and thousands of data points as a result of that. And we are more and more, and I'd like to encourage us to do it as much as we can, using that data, even just in the form of water quality reports back to community, is so important, so that the broader community, as well as understanding more about their environment, but also that our monitors see the value of their work. So that's just making sure that coordinators have the time to do the water quality reports. And then we're starting, once we've done that, we've been able to look at using water quality data to monitor environmental water, like in the program happening with the Waterway, and I'm sure James is doing similar things at Melbourne Water. So on reflection, I am seeing a massive shift in the last 5 years to water testing being integrated into waterway management at a much higher level than it was previously. Ironically, Jeanie, possibly this is a result of funding cuts, in that we no longer had, it's a funny positive result that while we no longer had a dedicated funding stream, we had to integrate with other projects to remain viable from a government perspective. And I think it did cause a lot of us to have to look at strategically where were we monitoring for a purpose. And I think this is very much, and community, from what I can tell, they're wanting their data used. So people are more than happy to move to a site that's more strategically important data-wise. So yes, that's a key improvement, and I think it's something that we can continue to improve on. But yes, reporting back to our volunteers is something I would like to see happen a lot more.
It's a great point. It's that kind of two-way movement across that bridge, building that relationship, continuing to build that trust. So James, what about for you? You know, 30 years from the water corporation perspective. You know, what do we do differently? What would we learn?
Yeah, I could echo a lot of what Kristen said in terms of our Melbourne WaterWatch has, found its way into strategic and operational, areas, and it certainly influences there. But as I think your discussion with Pat as well around communication, that to me that's probably a really key part. It's improving not only our feedback loop of how the citizen science data are used and applied internally, but also getting maybe a better two-way discussion around how can we use these data, how can we operationalize it, where are the opportunities, and then maybe can we look better at what data is appropriate for different uses. There's, as you said, Anthony, there's no bad stuff other than obviously wrong stuff, but there's different tiers of it, and different types are appropriate to different projects. And citizen science is pretty broad, and there's a whole range of stuff collected, and it all can fit into the puzzle. But it's just around, how do we better communicate where all those opportunities are? I don't think I've cracked that nut yet. But what I would say as coordinators of citizen science programs, certainly, identify and make the use cases for strategic and operational uses, and maybe drive towards an increasing accessibility of data, and an ability of volunteers almost to sort of see where it can fit in, and get it in there. And that may be within their own internal organisational priorities, or an allied organisation therewith as well, not just simply the organisation that they collect the information for as such.
It's so interesting. It's the value of such a panel, such a broad panel too. We've had thoughts and reflections on how the internal gearing of the agencies that can use the information can work better. We've had reflections on the resources. We've had reflections on how to better articulate and communicate to community where it's being used. It's such there's so many. What the wonderful thing I suspect about a program like WaterWatch is that it grows and adapts over time. And all those things you're all talking about sound like, in many cases, things that have been tried and tested and used and worked and added on and built on. I'd like to remind those of you who are watching that you can ask us a question. We're going to have a short Q&A after we've had a bit more of a chat. And so press the Q&A button. It's at the top, the side, or the bottom. It depends on the way you've got your team set up. And then you can pop in a question. And if you go in there and have a look, you can vote up questions. You can kind of go, oh, I like that question. Please ask that. And we'll have a look at that. Now, Jake, I do understand some have been going in the chat. So maybe if you could grab some of them and pop them in as well. Or if you put one in the chat yourself, pop it in the Q&A and we'll get them looked at. So one of the things that, we've had a look at the past, we've had a look at what we've learned, we've had a look at benefits, we've thought about some of those things. I want you to put your future thinking hats on. Okay, so this is our 30-year celebration for WaterWatch. Let's look 30 years in the future. What does the future hold for WaterWatch? What are your aspirations for it? I'm going to start with you, Kristen. Aspirations.
Okay.
30 years WaterWatch.
Okay. Well, I may not be a coordinator because I would hope that all NRM, particularly on waterways, is traditional owner-led, and that we are all working for traditional owner organisations on country, and that the idea of cultural values of water is something that all Australians resonate with as well. I'd also hope that people in the future look back on the data we collected and all you monitors out there collected over the last 30 years and say, thank goodness we've got that. That was integral for our response to climate change. We could not have understood waterways and some of the trends we're seeing if these community members hadn't taken the time, volunteered their time and petrol and everything else to go and get this data for us, so that we had very strong case for climate action in 2023, 24. That's a world that I'd like to see. So possibly there may not be a need for coordinators as such, because working with traditional owner organisations is now just second nature. This is how natural resource management and waterways are managed in 30 years' time.
Yeah, wow, thank you, Kristen. What an aspirational future, and hopefully one that's doable too. Victoria about to go through its treaty process, and the nation about to vote on a voice. So, those processes can start. James, let's go to you. 30 years' time, you're running Melbourne Water at this stage. What do you hope for WaterWatch?
Yeah, look, pretty exciting to think that far into the future. I think, first up, contributions and legacies are honoured and celebrated as we do today. But I think also, we think about the changing face of volunteering in some areas of society too. And, I think that like the work of, Pat, and also call out Deb Gonzalez Canada from the University of Melbourne, have done fantastic research on volunteering attitudes and experiences. So I think we're continuing 30 years into the future, we're continuing to adapt to the lifestyles of people, and really providing the greatest suite of opportunities to get involved, no matter the life stage or style of somebody, so that environmental volunteering's barriers are dropped, participation diversifies. We have a truly representative cross-section of the Victorian community connecting to their waterways, and really advocating strongly for them. And in a sense, we've sort of done that with Frog Census, in that we started with home recording devices, paper sheets that were filled out, and we moved to an app. And subsequent, a large national app, Frog ID, was also launched too. So we've seen an explosion of Frog citizen science through mobile phones. But what's the next step? Maybe some kind of crazy AI identifying device that you wave around or something. Who knows? But regardless of what that technology is, what I want to see in the future is a growth in environmental volunteering, a growth in ecological awareness of the role of our waterways and the values that they protect, and of course this bigger diversity of Victorians involved.
It's so interesting, because the programs like WaterWatch, I mean, they're literally just a microcosm of general society. Both of you have so far described other things that are happening in society as well. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, let's continue with our the future, our aspirations, 30 years' time. Jeanie, I'm going to come to you and I'll finish with you, Pat. But Jeanie, 30 years' time, WaterWatch, what is this, 2053? And we're back and we're having a celebratory conversation. I'm probably a bit older and a bit less, a bit more doddery, but what's the aspiration, WaterWatch, in 30 years?
Okay, well, I'll be in my 90s by then, so I thought I'd better think about this in a different way. So 30 years from now implies a new generation of adults monitoring their water environments and understanding them and sharing their knowledge. So that's the kids of today. So to get to there are three things that I think that we need that are critical. Firstly is leadership. I was privileged to be in the early part of WaterWatch when we had a dynamic leader, Vera Levchenko. I hope others will be found like her who have visions and a knack of getting the funding that's needed and the resources to support the monitors and do the community education, because certainly in the Wimmera we've suffered from that. Secondly is the monitors. Okay, so like others have said, I hope there will be a mix of ages learning and sharing with each other in caring from their water environments and from a diversity of peoples. But I hope especially that older people will stay involved and be matched with younger people learning from them. For example, Jeparit WaterWatch members have stayed in the group through their 70s to their 90s, sharing their wealth of knowledge of the past and drawing attention to changes, and that aids others' understanding. And thirdly is to value the monitoring. Okay, so here are some suggestions. The first one concerns the data. Data that was collected in the 1990s when it went onto the online database, there seemed to have been a great lack of knowledge that that data to be on the earlier versions of the database had to be QA/QC'd and verified. And so we find when you go looking for it, you can't find it easily because the database that is online starts at the preset level of level 3, that is top level. If you want to find the WaterWatch database that we collected, you have to actually go into the all levels data. And that ignores the fact that it was all QA/QC'd, and the lack of connect between different time periods meant that the assumption was made that it wasn't so good. And this is something that you've touched on earlier with a couple of the other speakers, saying that assumption. Whereas if people had bothered to speak to those of us who were on the ground, they would have known that was wrong. And the way that I see that's easiest to change that in the data that you can go and get online now and we'll be able to get online in the future, change that preset. Okay, a second thing is when monitors notice something and report it, act on it quickly. We suffer in Jeparit WaterWatch from repeatedly reporting the same thing and the agencies not having the money or the funding to get something done. And that's really hard for us as volunteers to sit by and watch ash trees growing in river red gum wetlands and nothing we can do about it. Okay, and the third key important part is the way that we go about developing monitoring skills and water quality awareness in schools. Currently, River Detectives program is doing a great job, and WaterWatch did a better job in the past, and I want to tell you why. In the past, we had in-class incursions by WaterWatch expert, and that led to an inspiration and confidence in teachers and students, regardless of whether a teacher was interested. With River Detectives, we have the model of a one-session PD to train an interested teacher, okay? And they are then expected to feel confident to go and train students while maintaining class discipline and answering any expert questions that might come up or deferring them. So I think we need to become aware of how we train people in the future is going to have an impact on what is there 30 years from now, and to work more towards getting what is more efficient in terms of education rather than efficient in dollars. And I think that is a big hurdle to be gone over in the future to keep us going for another 30 years.
Fantastic, thank you. Really insightful and excellent call to action for the future. I mean, we're all kind of circling around kids too in different ways, which I find really interesting and I think a really important message. We're running out of time. I don't know how many questions we'll get to be frank, but Pat, what's the future hold from your perspective for WaterWatch?
Yeah, thanks, Anth. Look, I'll keep it brief because I know we want to get to a bit of a Q&A. You know, I think one of the things about WaterWatch that's you know, going to hold it in good stead for the future is that it's a really adaptable, flexible, and diverse program. And I think they're the characteristics that will enable it to, you know, last the distance for another 30 years. And it's been really interesting to hear the reflections of the other panelists about the future, because at the moment, myself and Justine Holmes, the new statewide facilitator, are developing or working to develop the new WaterWatch and Estuary Watch plans. And so thinking about the future is definitely on our minds at the moment. And, some of the things that we are thinking about at the moment are, how the program can, as James was talking about, adopt advances in technology, not only to help with data collection, but to ensure that the data that's collected is integrated into other databases and that it's more accessible. How do we better align the program so it does align with waterway management priorities, to improve its impact on decision making, but also supports volunteers in their needs and interest in the program too. We're thinking about how the program can be evaluated as well. That's something that we haven't spoken about much in this meeting, but where are the areas of impact and where are the areas where there can be some improvements, and how can we evaluate that? And yeah, the last thing is just to say that we're thinking about how to ensure that volunteers are getting the most benefit out of their participation, because at the end of the day, this program would not exist without their ongoing efforts and dedication to the program. And like Jeanie. So I guess in 30 years' time, I do hope that WaterWatch retains its reputation as a crucial feature of waterway management. It connects local communities with their waterways, it enhances waterway health. But I think also too that there is a recognition of its potential to create opportunities for different ways of working to solve the challenges of the day, whether that be climate change or whether that be issues around diversity and inclusion.
Thank you so much. We've got about literally only about 5 minutes to answer some questions. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative and I'm going to smush a couple of them together. There's been some great questions. There's been a few in the chat. There's actually a whole other conversation happening in the chat as well. For those who aren't seeing it, it's very interesting. And, so anyway, there's a kind of a pattern in some of the questions about pollution and WaterWatch potentially evolving into being about pollution detection more so. And then there's also another one. Thank you for whoever put that in the chat. There's also another one about further partnerships. Now, Kristen already talked about an endpoint that is a completely different type of partnership. I'm wondering, and I want to go quickly to each of you, if you had to put your kind of thinking hat on, what would be maybe a left field partnership or a kind of an extension of some of these questions? Is it pollution related? Is it other types of related partnerships that WaterWatch could go into in the next 30 years? I'm going to start with you, Pat.
Yeah, I'm interested in the pollution detection question there. One of the things that I've noticed over observing this program over the years is that volunteers have a certain, they have access to different types of technologies that monitor water quality, but there's new emerging issues in waterways that are being addressed, and that might require different sorts of technologies and instruments to measure those types of issues. And so I guess the question that raises for me is, are there opportunities to support volunteer groups by providing access to tools and technologies that allow them to address those types of issues, such as emerging contaminants? And I guess we are seeing this a little bit in new technologies that are being used in the WaterWatch program through things like eDNA sampling with platypus monitoring. And so there is, I guess, always technology developing, and it's about getting that into the hands of the WaterWatch program, into the volunteers as well.
Yeah,
partnerships, but I'll leave it to the other.
So we've got 5 minutes, and I want to get around and hear each of your take-home messages. So maybe does anyone else want to pop in a thought, Kristen, Jeanie, or James, around other partnerships that we haven't already discussed?
Just
Kristen,
really quickly, because a lot of us are based outside of apart from Melbourne Water, outside of a lot of the high population areas. So somehow, how do we partner with the broader population. I know that sounds, but yes, the populations in the cities that are dependent on clean drinking water and beyond just our current funding from the water authorities, but how do we get that traction in the cities as well? I suppose more in understanding of catchment health in general.
Thank you. Excellent thought. We are, we promised to get everybody away at 1:29, finish by 1:30, because I'm sure people have meetings. So 30 seconds each. We're going to go around, and I'd like to hear your take-home message. The one thing you want to make sure everybody takes home from you, from the perspective today. I'm going to start with you, Jeanie, then I'm going to you, James. So, Jeanie, take-home message.
Okay, thank you. I think the full impact of the body of data collected by citizen scientists like WaterWatchers was only going to be understood when people in the future start delving into it like families do today into ancestry. And I really do hope that grandchildren will want to know what their Wimmera River and Lake Hindmarsh was like in the 1990s and what it was like in the millennium drought and the flood times, and that the WaterWatch online data will be there and easily accessible for them. So my take-home message is it's not really just about what we do today, it's all about the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant. James, take-home message.
Yeah, all data collected is important. You're operating, you're looking at change over multiple time scales. So it is important now for informing operational decisions. It is important, as Jeanie said, for a big historical perspective as well. There will be our descendants looking back and saying, hey, look, they recorded this, Pobblebonk frog down here 100 years ago, right? And that's an important record for informing the planning of the day. So don't ever think that what you submit, whatever type of environmental data, is not important. It always is.
Fantastic. Pat, and then we'll finish up with you, Kristen. Pat, take-home message.
A take-home message. Look, I think, for me, WaterWatch holds so much potential, as we've discussed today, and I think its future success will, hinge on the recognition that it is more than simply a community education or long-term water quality monitoring program. As I mentioned, it has that potential to be a crucial component of waterway management by providing that bridge between governments and local communities and the other groups and organisations that are involved in waterway management. So I think the future will involve a partnership approach for WaterWatch.
And Kristen, you get the last take-home message.
Thank you. I think just saying thank you to all of our monitors and volunteers and letting them know how valued they are. And just the take-home message really is, like, there's a few agency in the room here at the moment, but we could not do it without you. We really couldn't. When you look at the huge spread of water monitoring across our state and across the country. So I'm just constantly humbled and feel very privileged to be a coordinator working with you all.
And what a brilliant place to finish with that wonderful thank you to the people that really kind of make it happen, the volunteers. Thank you so much to Jeanie Clark. Thank you to Pat Bonney. Thank you to James Frazer. And thank you to Kristen Lees. And thank all of you for joining us. We were going to sing happy birthday, but then we decided, no, we won't actually do that to you. It's better that we just don't. Thank you very much for joining us all. And thank you very much, and we'll see you in the 60-year celebration. I understand WaterWatch is going to share the video of this for others so they can see this, and maybe this will be something they'll look back at. They'll take the indicators that we discussed as things they want to look at, and they'll evaluate if it's worked. So thanks very much, everybody, and goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your day.